Hey, Jardine. Oh, the professor's in, so I'm going to let him in now. We do little intros. Hi, Professor. How are you?
Hi.
Hey, good to see you. Cool
Good to
background.
see you. Oh, thanks. I took that last fall.
Oh, wow.
So
Where do you take it?
I was on a walk. It's the woods across the road from where I live, north of State College. So it was like the sun was going down and it was a nice chilly fall evening. I was out for a walk and that looked so nice.
Wow.
So I took a picture.
Nice. Yeah, I thought it was a natural Zoom background. Penn State had so much.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's an original to me.
It's here. One of our team members, Jardine, is on the call, and we invited a few partners in New York in case they wanted to join the Zoom today. So everyone like 5. Let me. Good afternoon. How are you? Okay, so I'm gonna give everyone about 5 minutes, and then we can get started around 6:05.
Okay.
And then it'll be recorded, so you know, we can also have that in network and share as well.
So is this going to be kind of like question and answer or
yeah, I think
some
for
other thing?
I would say most of the questions will probably like the ones that I emailed you, and you could just like get expertise based on that, and then I'll probably have a few engagement points, and anyone else who's on the call would also open to speak or ask questions or add a comment, but definitely mainly questions to your side and perspective.
Okay.
So it's like we got good weather this weekend. It's been like either really sunny or really rainy.
Yeah, it's been really hot and up until like the middle of this week, and then it like cooled down. I guess New York was really hot.
Yeah, it was really hot this last weekend. Pushing the hundreds. Okay, so I'll get started. So I can just do introductions in the meantime. Okay. Just of course, as you know, my name is Monet Smith. I'm the founder for Societal Justice Intervention, new organization based in New York. We focus on criminal justice reform. However, we focus on criminal justice reform as more of a preventative model. So a lot of that, what we study is, crime is often stems from issues within our communities and untapped resources and different things with the youth. So we focus on a lot of programming aspects. So really criminal justice reform, but more so the preventative aspects.
Okay.
One sec, adding a few people in. And if anyone else who's on the call wants to introduce themselves, say name and a little introduction.
Peace and love, everyone.
Good afternoon, Deshaun. How are you?
I'm doing fine. My name is Deshaun Davis. I'm from Harlem, 31 years old. I'm trying to start an organization called Sweep Your Block Before They Sweep You. Basically, that is to change the narrative on, from my experience, taking care of an institution before you take care of your own neighborhood. I've been institutionalized since I was 13 years old, in and out. So I understand how it feels to come home to nothing. And so that's why I started Sweep Your Block, so we can always have a re-entry back into society more easier than ever.
Thank you, Deshaun. Deshaun's one of our newer team members as well. Usman, do you want to introduce yourself? Usman? So we could go ahead and jump into some questions while wrapping up. Deshaun, you can mute yourself. What's the question? Okay, so Professor, you could introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do at Penn State and research that you do.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me to talk to all of you. And I'm Jeff Ulmer. I'm a professor of sociology and criminology here at Penn State, and I'm the director of our Criminal Justice Research Center. I just started that position in January. And I was one of Monet's professors at Penn State. That's how she knows me. So she had my class on criminology theory. And, you know, it's amazing what she's done, you know, getting out of college and in such a short time. My main kind of research I do is, you know, the main thing the research I publish is and done is in sentencing, courts and sentencing, particularly racial and ethnic disparities and regional disparities, different, you know, disadvantages and inequalities in criminal sentencing by race and by ethnicity and by place. You know, I've been doing that kind of research for probably close to 30 years now. And another kind of research I've done is some research on violent crime and social inequality and institutional presence, like the effect of community institutions, in particular churches. But you know, that's less my expertise than the criminal justice, the courts and corrections, and but I've done so. But I also, you know, I in teaching, you know, about criminology, criminal justice, and teaching about, you know, what causes and prevents crime. You know, I follow the, you know, what's going on in the research world in criminology all the time. And so I know a lot of other people who are doing really exciting research, some at Penn State, some elsewhere. But so that's kind of where I'm coming from and the kinds of things that I know about.
Thank you for that introduction, Professor. So I guess we could get right into it. So as you know, the purpose, you know, of this call is to really, one, is societal justice intervention. You know, we're advocates. We focus on advocating for certain policies as well as, you know, providing certain things for the community. But it's also, you know, studying in terms of, you know, what is going on in our society or what's going on in our neighborhoods when we see certain patterns or certain things going on, especially when it's like not just from one particular particular neighborhood, but we're seeing it in multiple areas. So, as we know, since COVID, we're kind of going what I call a crisis in terms of our crime rates, seem to be going. And I know, Professor, as you mentioned in one of our previous calls, it's not just general crime rates, but it's a certain type of crime, which is all the more concerning. So I guess my first question to you, Professor, would be, what's your initial thoughts when with this discussion in terms of post-COVID and any sort of relation, with COVID, since that is something that, we've seen in sort of this time frame?
Yeah, well, this is one of the things, I mean, criminologists are really, really looking at this, and policymakers too. And it's a huge, set of questions. But, some of the facts that kind of stand out are, one, it's actually not all crime going up. It's violent. It's really, if you boil it down, it's gun violence. So it's kind of the worst crime. It's it's homicides, which are mostly committed by guns, and gun violence, assaults. Interestingly, things like robbery aren't going up, like robbing people by force and stuff. That's not going up. Rape is not going up. Burglary is not going up. Those, the property crimes kept going down. And so, and this is all kind of 2019 and especially 2020. And there's also a big frustration that 2021's national crime data is not available. The federal government the Department of Justice hasn't released 2021 crime rate data, like for the whole year, because they said they were switching over to a new system, and which is the NIBRS system, and they didn't get enough participation across jurisdictions in the country, so they just didn't release. They haven't released the crime data for 2021 for the whole year. So that's really frustrating. But other sources like the National Crime Victimization Survey and news reports and things like that, and CDC records for gun homicides. CDC has every death in the United States gets reported to the Center for Disease Control, and they have it listed by causes of death. So they know how many suicides there are, how many homicide, how many COVID deaths, how many homicides, and so that's not affected by anything that Justice Department did. And homicides in particular went up again. And it's impossible to not think that it's something to do with COVID. And especially because lots of people have talked about, and it's true, I've seen it with students. I've seen, here at Penn State, I've seen it with my own family. This big mental health crisis is one thing, just the stress and strain and uncertainty of all this, of people's lives and communities just getting blown up, and then two, the other thing that's happened is just this explosion. I just read an article right now before this of how 2020 was the top year in history in gun sales. 23 million guns were sold in the United States, an all-time record. And we know that 2021 and gun sales keep going up and up and up. So we're just number one, we have, I'm not oversimplifying this, and I'm not saying this is all the problem with the nation's crime rates, but again, the thing that's going up is gun homicide and gun violence. And we have a lot of strain in the social system, and we have more guns than probably, well, I don't want to say more guns than ever before. That's not actually true. But this, many, many more guns out there in people's hands now than was true 5 years ago, so it's this, this conflagration of those things that, that lots of criminologists are saying, like, those are the main suspects, in terms of, like, right, what's happening now.
Interesting.
And so, and what that, and what, I've talked about this with Monet, like, the thing that this also tells me, and others, is this isn't about something that police are doing or not doing. Like, this isn't a policing problem. Some like to say that, oh, COVID or protests against police or things like that made police pull back and the depolicing narrative. And I don't buy that. A lot of criminologists don't buy that, because if that was the case, why didn't burglary go up? Why didn't robbery go up? Why didn't simple assault go up? Why didn't car theft go up? If it's something that police are doing, then why didn't all crime go up? Why was it just violent, basically gun violence and homicide? So I think the those that want to point to, the same old solutions about we need more cops and we need stronger policing and stuff, I think they're, it's not just me, I think most of the criminologists that I, work with would say the same thing. That's missing the mark, and if we do that, we will just, we'll just aggravate a lot of other problems that we've had.
And when you say aggravate a lot of other problems, I know, so you mentioned that, a lot of people are blaming the police and a lot of the things that we saw in the early COVID days, such as protests and the kind of the lack of support, for police as the main contributors to the current crime crisis. But basically what I'm hearing you say is, that's not really what the studies are showing, just because it's a specific type of crime. So I guess my question to you is, why do you think it's so easy for people or for society in general to resort to policing as the main issue? Especially when
well, that's always the easiest answer, and there's this widespread perception, and Monet, you learned this in class, like this was a big theme. I'm like, and this isn't me, this is the field of criminology and sociology, but most of what affects crime rates is not due to the criminal justice system. It's about communities and institutions and the economy and opportunities and things like that, and social control, social bonds, things like that. So, and by the time that the police get called to a situation, things are already messed up. Something's already gone wrong. And yes, there's a deterrent impact of police being seen and police presence, but most of the average public thinks that the opposite. They think, well, the criminal justice system is the main thing that causes crime to go up or down. And in the 80s, when I was in college and grad school, in the 80s and 90s, it was, it was about prison. It's like, we have to lock people up. The criminal justice system is too soft. We need mandatory minimums to crack down on drug dealers, and we need mass incarceration. And, then in the 2000s, late 90s and 2000s, it became police. It's like, well, no, it's all about police. And, that was more right than the prison part. But, even there, like police, you can put all your efforts into policing and you still, and if you don't do anything else, you know, you still won't really solve what's producing high crime. You know, you'll just be reacting to it more efficiently and more severely, you know. But in terms of like why, it's, you know, why do people think that? Well, because I mean, that's the average person doesn't know anything about criminology, and they know what they see on TV, and they know that what's in the news, and they know what politicians say. And they always, you know, many politicians always, the first thing they do is talk about police or the criminal justice system or getting tough, you know, and that's always been the case. Like that's the first place the narrative goes. But it, you know, if you don't do anything else, you just get more policing, you know. And what I meant by aggravating the other problems is, you know, that kind of thinking is how we got stop and frisk. And it's how we got, you know, the gang task forces in Los Angeles, you know, that like just basically produce police contact, and that's their job. And that's how we got the school to prison pipeline. And, you know, that's the, you know, that's the unwanted consequences of just going to the criminal justice system as our thing that solves a crime, you know. And I'm not saying there's no role for police. I'm saying like that's not going to get you, you know, what you really want.
Yeah. And I know one thing you mentioned, so you said, you know, we tend to focus more so on just the justice system when it comes to resolving crime, instead of like the other systems that, you know, are more contributing factors. What sort of social structures or institutions, if you will, would you say, you know, are either contributing factors to crime or are factors that help deter crime?
So, and again, this is, you know, I know about research that's done by people other than me, and policy action and policy, what's the words I'm looking for? Pushing, you know, policy evaluation and recommendations that come from people other than me. Like John McDonald of Penn, he's a really good person. Dave Ramey here at Penn State. I don't know if you ever had Dr. Ramey. Karina Greif, who studies communities and crime. But you know, this body of research, and criminology. Rob Sampson, of course, at Harvard. You know, it points to communities, and the resources of the communities, and you know, jobs and schools and community institutions, one of which is churches, but not because of it's not, I'm not talking about that churches like make people behave, you know, teach people religion and make people behave right. I mean, certain churches do a lot of things for communities. You know, they have suppers, they have food pantries, they hold AA meetings, they do outreach, you know. One of my, and I told you, you know, one of the studies I and a colleague did, you know, showed like Black Protestant churches, especially traditionally Black Protestant church denominations, presence was related to lower crime, especially in more disadvantaged areas, you know, because those churches do lots of outreach, you know, community activity. But you know, that's just one example. You know, another research, Pat Sharkey is his name at Ohio. No, he's at Cornell now. He was at Ohio State. Pat Sharkey's shown, you know, and he has a book and article, but like the more community, local community institutions, like local, I mean, and I mean, I mean like clubs, I mean like soccer teams, I mean like, things that, I'm blanking on like, I'm blanking on the kind of things, but these kind of community institutions, especially those that provide like social capital and social control, those communities have like way less homicide and violence. And this also then all has to have like an economic base, of schools, invest in schools, just right there. It's right there. If you invested lots and lots in schools and made them have more resources and things for kids to do and more programs for them to get involved in, you would have a lot of impact on, youth delinquency and later crime and gangs and all kinds of things. And there's just tons of criminology that shows that. That's the, if I only had one magic thing that I could do in a community, in a city, in a county, in a neighborhood, and this goes for rural and urban too. Like the number one thing I would do is just focus on the schools. If I'm not saying that there's not other important things to do, there are, but I mean that would get you, seems to get the most leverage, and make schools safe, good, with activities, that kids can get involved in, with technology and so forth.
Yeah. Interesting. So one thing, I'm hearing you say is, one major contributor to crime that people often ignore is just people tend to focus more so on the legal system, the criminal justice system, but mainly what you're saying is it's social structure within societies and within communities that also bridge that gap. And I'm hearing you say that
Yes.
social structure is created in the community, is created by community organizations. So I guess my next question is, while we have a lot of members and leaders from different community organizations on the call, are for the recording, as an expert within this area, and based on what the studies say, would you recommend community organizations or people who work in touch with these communities to do, or what should their main focuses be with this similar goal?
Well, anything, just any kind of outreach you can do, and anything you can do with kids, with teenagers, who, the crime prone age group is age 15 to 24. Anything this is something I'm not an expert in at all, but I know there's, been big successes in Oakland and Boston and Philadelphia, I think, in like intervention program, like gang intervention, bullying intervention, mostly led by like ex-gang members or reentering justice involved people, that's one thing. But the specific things, drug and alcohol help, treatment, mental health, community mental health, community conflict resolution, one of the things I've been studying in criminal justice in courts and stuff has been, studying the death penalty and homicides. and how those are prosecuted and sentenced. But in the course of that, collecting data, I've read bunches and bunches of just me personally read bunches and bunches of homicide cases and looked through the prosecutor files and everything. And, so much is just, homicides, gun homicides or other homicides. It's, disputes that got out of control, it's just beefs that get out of hand. And, the winner, the winner goes to jail and the loser goes to the morgue, and that's been true for a long time. Yeah, I see a message there. We have Life Camp, Bragg, GMACC. I'm not familiar with those programs, but that sounds like the exact kind of thing that I'm talking about. And I'm not an expert on but I know people that are like, more involved in that. Another piece I don't want to leave out is reentry. And Deshaun, I remember you saying like, you were in prison, and there's people that like Bruce Western, I think he's at Harvard, but one of our former students at Penn State who she did a big study of reentry and what helps and hurts like men reentering from prison who had substance abuse problems. And she pointed to, and I could give her her name too. Her name's Kim Davidson. She's Florida State now. But housing, stable housing was one of the biggest things she found in her research with interviewing, following like people getting out of prison, especially men with substance abuse problems, men getting out of prison and what they needed, and what helped and hurt. But stable and safe housing. And she found that, there's sometimes like halfway houses were, actually not helpful if they weren't very good, because, then you get a bunch of guys in there and they encourage each other to use, and then you're using again. And then it's going to lead back to crime or getting caught, getting parole revoked. But support for housing and reentry and safety and aftercare for reentry and mental health, in reentry, as opposed, and this is another one of these things this is hit or miss. There are some communities in some states that like have lots of help for reentry, and then there's others that just don't. They don't do anything. They just say, here's $200, and well, maybe we'll help you find a place to stay temporarily, and good luck. Which is the traditional thing that prisons always did. But those are things that I, more specific. Again, I'm a researcher. I'm not a community deliverer, service person. But I know people, again, well, that's, you all are super involved in that.
Yeah, definitely good point. So I guess my next question is, what I'm hearing you say a lot is that a lot of, our issues are stemming from, a lot of not having programs for resources, community organizations, educations, and as well as housing for, the post effects after incarceration. So I guess I kind of want to bring the topic to New York. I know you're based in Pennsylvania, but I guess, the question being, as we discussed earlier, this crisis that you mentioned, after COVID and seeing a rise in homicides and especially gun-related homicides. And you said that a lot of that comes from, one, the resources within the community, and two, the aspect of mental health that we've been seeing after COVID. So as we know, New York is a very big city. It's always, very interesting when it comes to criminal justice, whether that's being very proactive in reforms, or that's going back to, the notorious stop and frisk policies. But right now, 2022, now we're 2 years post-COVID. We're kind of in the transition phase of, edging out of COVID, but we're still dealing with the COVID effects. So I guess, for the post effects, especially with this crisis and homicide relating going forward, what are your thoughts? Because one thing about New York, just to give you a little synopsis, especially with some of the things that you pointed is, New York, as we all know on the call, is going through a housing crisis. We had a housing crisis before, but it's getting even worse now without COVID in terms of stable housing and affordable housing. Our community organizations is definitely another key piece. We're struggling. It's always been a struggle for our community organizations and nonprofits to find funding, and especially when we have an exacerbated economy, and that's not a main focus in the government. When we focus more so on policing and things like you said, we tend to focus more on criminal justice aspects of it rather than the community aspects of it, which prevent it. So, we're not seeing a strong amount of funding and a strong amount of support for our community organizations. Education article just came out in the New York Times about how they're actually severely decreasing public education in New York because a lot of you are doing private schools. So public education, but even though it decreased last year, it's decreasing substantially within the next few years. Lack of program, which also has community organizations. Mental health is always a struggle for access, like we've seen in the post-Nixon, having shelters and different things like that. And like we're seeing a lot of New York now with the current administrations when it comes to politics, we're seeing, the focus with this crisis that we talked about with violence and community violence and gun violence, shifting to policing and punitive and get tough on crime models rather than the community organizations. So with that, we're seeing an expansion, more people still at Rikers, people incarcerated, and just more police on the street and stronger funding and backing for that. So, with those effects that I described, like in New York, what are your initial thoughts or what are your suggestions dealing with that crisis coupled with what we're seeing now going on in the city?
Well, all that sounds really unfortunate. I mean, that sounds like doing the same old things, the same old things that we did in the 80s and 90s. And again, I mean, few things are more political than crime and criminal justice. And few things are more misunderstood by the public. And, the decisions, what's frustrating is the decisions that are affecting, New York City and their schools and, their housing and stuff are being made by people out, elsewhere. But that's everything you said sounds like the opposite direction of what what would be the implications of what criminologists would say. The housing, I mean, at the risk of sounding like I'm oversimplifying things, but people get wrapped up in the criminal justice system when they don't have what they need to live, and that when they don't have a place to be and they don't have, places to get an education, they don't have an education, and that leads to, when you see communities anywhere where those things are true, where people don't get their needs met, the needs of life and the needs of social opportunity, then you have crime. And that's true in rural Pennsylvania or Los Angeles or London or New York, you know. And so when you make it harder for people to get what they need, and you make it more harder for schools to like provide good education and activities and opportunities and counseling for students, for kids, you know, you're going to pay for that, like that one way or another. I mean, you know, you know, you can't cut these things and then you know, I mean, this flies in the face of 100 years of sociology, you know. And you know, and yet, yes, you can, you know, yes, you can, like I said, you can put more cops on the street, and you can do hotspots policing and all this stuff, and you can, you know, you can have less crime in the short term in specific places, which just, you know, but then what have you cost? You know, what have you lost with, you know, community trust and, you know, community integrity, you know? So you lose that. I see there was a,
so we're actually going to
historically,
up to questions now on
yeah,
that note. So the first question we have, if you want to come up the mic and ask it, or I could ask it out loud. But the first question, go ahead.
Oh. Hi, my name is Kara Sylvain, Executive Director of NNLB United, which is a political education organization. So we focus on research and policy data collection on socioeconomic problems with the emphasis to advocate for reparations. We're abolitionists. And so we are a Black org, all Black marginalized genders. And I wanted to just ask, like, historically, because this is a new role for us. I've been a community organizer, national organizer, but historically, what role has criminologists and those who who connect socioeconomic trends to all types of violence in our community, what role have they historically played in advocacy? My experience is when I come with the data, we just got off of doing the data collection of the Breathe Act, which is a federal policy on everything that we're talking about here, and showing data to elected officials and politicians what Black people are actually saying that they would want to keep them safe. The top 5 things was housing, fully funded education, getting rid of food apartheid deserts, more community access. And then the last one was a toss up depending on where you ask Black people, but, you know, in rural areas versus like, you know, city areas. Some of them were like churches and all the things you named. And I'm just curious to, when you said before, it sounds like we're doing the same thing. We are doing the same thing. I mean, some of us are probably too young or to remember, or were very young during the mass incarceration crack epidemic. But from what I hear my parents talk about from the documentaries that are only barely 30 years old, we're literally doing the same exact thing. And I haven't run into a lot of criminologists on this advocacy work. So I was just wondering, is advocacy part of the role of criminologists? And if not, how can we maybe bridge the gap so that this data is getting to those who make decisions on behalf of us?
So that's a huge issue and question, you know. And historically, I mean, it's been hit or miss. In general, I mean, if I had to say whether sociologists and criminologists have had big impacts on policy and politicians? I'd have to say in general, no. But that said, like there's specific, there's specific things, there's specific people and specific agencies that have had more success. Philip Atiba Goff is a example who, actually does, I think he's a psychologist, but he actually works with police training, agencies around the country that actually want him, and works on, racial bias training. The an example here at Penn State, and again, this is my thing is sentencing, courts and sentencing, and we have a relationship with the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing, where we do research for the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing and help them inform, and have pushed for, help the commission push for, less incarceration. Don't pass this new law trying to, have more, the commission was instrumental and helpful in, opposing and ultimately getting rid of mandatory minimums in Pennsylvania. That's an example. It's like a specific thing and specific people working with specific agencies. So, in general, like with politicians, often, and lots of articles and op-ed pieces and things have been written by criminologists saying, nobody listens to us in terms of politics. But when you get down to specific people and specific agencies and specific things, that's when you find successes. Reentry too, like this Kim Davidson I told you about, she works with reentry, organizations or reentry activists and organizations. So on the one hand, neither you nor people like me have the ear of politicians, especially some kinds of politicians, because let's face it, a lot of politicians are not interested in data, really. They're interested in the politics of what they're doing. But, if you can get the ones that are, and some are good, some are very interested and have very open ears, like our Governor Wolf in Pennsylvania has been good. Then you make some headway, but it's less than you or I would want, in terms of influence and we often get that's nice, go do your little studies and let us worry about, the real political stuff. And, I won't get into political partisan kinds of things, but because it's gone, but I've had it both ways too. I've had my research that I've done dismissed by really progressive people because it didn't square with what they wanted. So, not very often, but it's the activist researcher. I'd say it's just got to be specific. It's got to be particular people on particular things with particular groups.
Yeah. And one thing I would add too, by the way, for everyone on the call, now that we've ended the speaking, this is more of an open forum for the question and answers, then we'll get to the Sean's question. But one thing I would just say about, curious, I definitely think for New York specifically, and that's kind of one avenue that I'm personally approaching, being a criminologist and criminology major myself, and also an advocate, an activist. I think when we have our organizations and when, as anyone anyone who's an activist, in New York knows we're stronger when we're together. Politicians listen more so to the people because they listen to their numbers. So if the people are saying, let's say like back in the day when criminal justice reform was very bipartisan and both parties agreed with criminal justice reform. Why? Because the people said prisons are bad and locking people in a cage and making them mentally unstable isn't good. But now it's interesting because now we're seeing the people are more so shifting because the rise in crime. But as Professor mentioned, we're taught to see the rise in crime as a fault within the system. So since we see this, it's like now, politicians are kind of swaying, the people are swaying away from the reforms because they think the reforms, they think that the system, is the thing that causes incarceration when really it's the reforms that help it. So really, when we galvanize analysis activists, when we galvanize the people and we have, the people, whether that's the activists as the people or the general public say like, no, we want more investments in our community. We want more housing, we want more programs because these are the things that help our community and help the crime rates. Then we're stronger when we do that. But, when we have our community members and say like, no, we need more police because we feel unsafe. And that's the narrative, then that's how it's swayed. So I definitely say like when we have organizations use the research, like, Professor, like your organization who does research, phenomenal research, by the way, in New York, I think like that's how we touch the politicians when we are able to touch the people.
Yeah. And get them to, don't get them to not do the same old things, that didn't work before. Kate, an example, I think we talked about this at some point, but an example of this, exactly what you're talking about. The cash bail reform. I know that was big in New York. There's not a shred of evidence anywhere that getting rid of cash bail increases crime. Mm-hmm. Like it just doesn't. All it does is stop disadvantaging people without money. But with the crime, the traditional criminal justice is everything. The first thing they came after was cash bail. Oh, this is putting criminals on this. It's not. It didn't put, because that risk release is like, violent offenders don't get released anyway. All you did was keep the misdemeanor person in jail because he or she couldn't pay $10,000. Cash bail doesn't affect crime at all. And there's lots of research on that, but still, like, they came with their knives out for getting rid of cash bail,
they didn't want to listen to the research. They didn't want to listen to the research. I was an organizer for 2019 was a really historic year for us in New York. I was an organizer for bail reform and housing. And we got some of our biggest wins. And then now to see how housing is acting, we got 7 of our 9 housing bills passed. And now what we're seeing with housing, great. How New York City now just voted to increase lease renewals up to, I think, only 5%. And then all the rollbacks on bail and all of that. And we showed them all of the data that cash bail was not the reason for. And because of politics, even some of our champions were like, well, I want my seat, so I'm going to roll it back, even though all of the data supported exactly what you just said. And we're continuing to put that out there. And it's just like, the politics game is also, I think we also have to come to a realization that some of the people we vote for, they're not really in this to structurally dismantle what we're trying to do. And that's kind of a hard pill to swallow for those of us who care about these issues. But you're absolutely right.
Yeah. I'm in awe and amazed, the successes you've had, with getting these bills, the housing and the bail reform, I'm so glad to hear about the big wins, and, dismayed that you have to keep fighting the same battles.
Sean, did you also have a question?
I would just like to add on to what Jeffrey was saying. First off, that made me chose my college. I already know what I'm going to college for now.
Hey.
Thank you.
Yeah, do that.
I'm just a specialist in this, and I ain't never know it. Just listening to y'all makes me understand a lot more. a lot of great points that you was hitting, Jeffrey. And one of the things that I know is me being incarcerated for 6 years and understanding that rehabilitation does work. And that's
Yeah.
what, that's what, if we're going to jail, we're supposed to be rehabilitated.
Yeah.
And that comes with part of being re-entered back into society. So you could take our environment away from us, and then you throw us back into the pit without nothing.
Yeah.
It's just asinine.
It's always been the problem.
Right.
You take, this goes back like, to the beginnings of, the whole idea of parole and probation and everything. It's like, treat it like it's this individual thing. Like we'll fix up this individual and then we'll put them right back in the environment,
right,
where, all the things that produce crime are, and no jobs and, no education and, and we're, oh, wow, look, that doesn't work. But it wasn't working 100 years ago either.
It's never gonna work, because it's a target of people that they're targeting. And if they're not helping the minds, then what are they doing? So me being incarcerated for 6 years, I'm one of a million coming home and having a mind like this. All my friends went back to jail within months. I've been home 7 years. Right?
Wow.
Within months, my friends went right back.
You beat the odds.
Right. So, but it's a hard game though, because you have to have things in front of you that you say, this don't make no sense. Like me going, it doesn't make no sense. But at the times, I didn't have any resources. So that's why it didn't make no sense, because it's like, damn, a lot of people that's in jail are being very taken care of. And that's like it's like a flip side, because now you need to learn how to be responsible. You need to learn how to take care of your things.
Yeah.
So it's like they handicapped us in a way. So I feel like I'm capitalizing, right? Because I know when it is to come home, and some people just don't have that mind, and you could be influenced to be pulled back quick, because now if you don't got the resources and you seeing all the things that's going on, instant gratification, you're like, nah, I want to get it. Like, I remember how I used to get money. So we got to come with new structures, new game plans, because it's new minds. The youth is a little bit different. I know that because I was young and I listened. They don't listen. That was from my mother.
Yeah.
They installed that in me no matter what. So now I'm at this age, I'm like, oh, I get to fall back on them principles. They don't have nothing to fall back on but music. So like you said, we need more activists.
Yeah.
We need more people out there that been through this, that understand the language, understand the talk. And that's what I see right now. I said, sweep your block before they sweep you. It's
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. Well, there's great colleges around, in New York City with criminology. There's John Jay, city. They're one of the best. Right. Rutgers is really great. There's just lots of great places to go. So I hope you go and major in sociology and criminology, and you'll like what you hear.
And I'm definitely,
you'll be good at it.
Yeah, I say I'm definitely Deshaun, you're muted. I say, but also I'm definitely glad to hear that Sean's very, active, and we definitely look forward to, bringing him into our org as well. And definitely, I'm criminology, sociology enthusiast. So whatever you need in that process, we're right here as well. As S.J.I. So.
Yeah. Another thing about the relation, the research and policy and research and law, another dialogue that needs to happen more and happens a lot less than you might think it does is like research and activists and lawyers. like defense lawyers, community activist lawyers, you know, like lawyers know how to do stuff in the legal system, like file lawsuits and, or, you know, defend people and, you know, but yet it's surprising to think this, but there, you know, there's kind of traditionally been a disconnect between like, you know, criminologists like me and like criminal lawyers or activist lawyers, you know, and traditional law school, you don't learn about research, you learn about how to do law, you know, and then in my training, you know, I didn't learn about law, I learned about how to do sociological research. And I didn't know how to be a lawyer, you know. So like getting together, like alliances with lawyers, like who are like on board, you know, because they can help get stuff done. Wow. You know, somebody like me, I will freely admit, you know, somebody like me, I'm all ideas and books and reading, and I mean, not all just because because what I study is out there in the world, and I study it like in person, and you know, I get up to my knees in the stuff, but like, you know, but I don't know what to do, like, you know, specific things. You all do, you know, and people that like another group that like to talk, you know, to work with is lawyers, like lawyers who get the connection between like data and people and reforms.
No, yeah, definitely very powerful. And that's actually, you know, a good point. That's one reason like why we as S.J.I and I like to hold these calls is definitely, you know, having the standpoint and advisement, like everything could always be reformed. That's a system or what that's our works. Like I'm always open to conversations like this and for, you know, that consulting piece. So definitely, you know, I'm personally interested in criminal defense law. So definitely
okay.
The bridge the connection for, you know, attorneys as well, you know, within our activism that we're doing in New York as well.
Right. Yeah. You know, I mean, if you find that rare person who like has legal training and like research training, you know, like you will, you know, they can do a lot.
Are there any other questions?
Well, I have one more thing to mention. I'll provide it to you when I get it. But there's going to be, I'm a reviewer for it. There's going to be a National Academy of Science report done. It's going to come out later this fall. And I just got done reviewing it and like making suggestions and comments because I was picked as a reviewer. But it's going to be great. It's going to be super helpful. It's on racial inequality in crime and the criminal justice system. And it says a lot of this, and it's got tons of data, and it has a lot of the stuff we were talking about. And then it's going to have it, you know, the conclusion, it's going to have conclusions and recommendations, like specific recommendations, you know, for addressing racial inequality in the criminal justice system and in the outside the criminal justice system and the things that produce crime that we were talking about. So I'll make that. I don't know exactly when it's coming out because they have to revise it after having lots of comments and everything, but that's going to be very, very good. And it's put together by all different people, researchers, activists, lawyers, and others. So it's going to be really good. A historian. So I'll provide you with that when it comes out.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll send that to our partners as well. David, do you have a question?
Yeah, hi, good evening to the panel.
Hey.
Monette, first I want to tell you that your idea of, folks coming together within the space and working together as a big force to push back on all the wrongs that has been happening, and the change not happening fast enough is very important. And that is one of the main concepts behind the Remedy Project, which I co-founded with Anna. We started out of Columbia and Barnard, using Columbia and Barnard students, but this organization is really for students across America, like yourself, Monette and Deshaun, you guys, anyone who is considers themselves a student and wants to continue to push for real immediate change within the prison system. The Remedy Project is an organization created for that purpose. So students across America come together and work to highlight the issues that people are suffering right now in this crisis, because the American prison system is a crisis. It hurts, damages people daily, mentally, physically, emotionally, and their families. There is nothing good that comes from this prison system, and it needs, so, and we keep talking about change and enacting bills and all these different things, and they drag on and stay so long to come to fruition. And so the goal or the concept of the Remedy Project is to have all these students come together, create a big foundation, a big body of folks looking for real immediate change on their platform, and push for that immediate change instead of all of this long conversations and bills to come next 10 years that when it does come, or you do pass it, you only enact half of it or less than half of it. And then the parts of it that you do enact, the folks in the system don't follow it anyway. So so nothing really, no changes really come about, or if any, it's very little. So that's what the Remedy Project is about. We are launching an action page within the next month or so, by which all students and family members and all supporters could come on board and sign up and take action as one big unit, as one body, you know, to make things happen for folks who are incarcerated at this point through their administrative remedy process. We help them with that. That's the way that any issue that they have is brought to light within the system officially. And then we put it, then we're going to march for these folks online to bring attention to these issues, to force the prison staff to deal with these issues immediately instead of continuing the abuse and neglect that they have done for, over the ages. So that's what the Remedy Project is about. And so that's good to see students and folks and anyone who is involved in the justice system wanting change could do that. And so with that, Jeffrey, my question or concern is, I've done time myself, 10 years. I was wrongfully incarcerated in the drug wars, right? The drug war got me all messed up in the system. I did 10 years in the feds. And while there, defending myself and others, I studied the system well, but not just the system, the mentality of those who run the system and those who are incarcerated, right? And so I'm thinking, and so I understand the mentality of both sides, and that there is serious disconnect with getting folks who, like Deshaun said, who are in prison to really want to rehabilitate and or change, you know, not to end up back into prison when they come out, right? Because if you don't have a mindset to rehabilitate yourself while you're in prison, and come outside and do something right, you know, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be rehabilitated, because the prison systems have no real rehabilitation within them. They say that they're for that, but there's no real, their stuff is propaganda just to show that we are doing something so that we could continue to collect the funding. Right, so prison is a real serious business, and that's all it is, right? So there's no rehabilitation within prison, really. So it's only those who really want to rehabilitate themselves who find a way to do that within the prison, right? And so if there is no real push to change the mentality of the masses to rehabilitate themselves and to do better and to change, just like the folks on the street in the communities who are struggling to get into the schools, who are struggling to eat, who are struggling to survive, and to get what they need daily in order to keep themselves on a straight and narrow path and not be forced to do some wrong or heinous stuff to survive. We need to give them the support that they need mentally and educationally to keep them on that path. But here's the problem. How do you convince them to change and to stop what they're doing, stop making these bad and or wrong decisions that would land you in these folks' prison system where they could just make money off of you? How do you convince them to do that if you can't convince the folks who run the system to stop doing the bad and the wrongs that they do? Right, that continues to perpetuate the hurt and the crushing, things upon our community. Like, for instance, the American prison system, right? The officers and those who run the system, they allow hindrance of the administrative remedy process, which is how folks are supposed to complain. They retaliate against folks. They neglect folks daily, mentally, emotionally, medically, psychologically. They ignore folks, and it's just a lot of hurt continuing perpetually. And the majority of them have no real sense or whereabout of wanting to change it, right? So I could tell you when Obama was passing his laws back when I was incarcerated, a lot of the prison staff was not for it, right? And they were blatantly talking amongst each other, and you could hear them, well, that's not going to happen, or we're not going to allow that to happen, because if that happens, then what are we going to do? Where are our jobs going to come from? Where am I going to get a job now? Right? So they didn't want real change or folks to get any benefit because they saw their jobs being at risk. So and so they have this constant mentality that it's them against those who are incarcerated. It's us against you, and we're going to punish you, and we're going to do all these things, and you're going to neglect you, and so on. And we're going to continue this cycle because it first thing first, it gives us financial stability, and it's what our bosses want because it's a business. And they continue to do these wrongs. Like police continue to wrongfully arrest and wrongfully harass folks of a certain background, and all these different things. They don't want to change. The majority of them don't want to change. And so how do you get, if they don't want to do it, how do you get the folks who continue to commit these crimes and act out on a off and on basis that they should stop doing these things if you can't even get the others to, because they see that, right? And they say, but you're being a hypocrite. You want me to not do this. You don't want me to not commit a crime or abuse someone on the street when you're doing it daily in the prisons and otherwise, right? And so that's where my thing is, Jeffrey. How big of a part that is with everything that you talked about? How big of a part that is with the whole with making the real change and seeing change in crime on the street?
That's a huge thing, like, so in this case, like in prison, the prison guards, the prison staff, and not wanting to, let's say even like reforms get implemented, they don't want to implement it, they don't want to do it, or they don't, and they don't believe, they don't believe people can change, and they don't care, they're cynical. And it's just, and so yeah, I hear you about like this, the prison, what goes on in prisons, and the prison staff and the guards, is often horrendous. And it doesn't take, it doesn't take a lot to be a prison guard, to be a corrections officer. Most places you have to have a high school education or GED, but and then they give, a lot of places, the training is just, weapons and custody, and how to operate the, the doors and things like, and the rules and procedures, but nothing about dealing with people actually.
All right, but
I don't know the answer. So, and I don't know the answer to what to tell, a young man in prison when, like, you're seeing around you the authorities breaking the rules, but you're supposed to not break the rules. The only thing I would say personally is like, think of yourself, think of what's best for you and your family and your community. Like, it's not in your interest to wind up back here. It's not in your interest, and it's not in your family and community's interest to keep perpetuating harm. Even if these other people are, it's not gonna help you and yours. So that's the only thing I could think of to say, if I was talking to the kind of person you're describing. It's like, think of what's best. Even don't look to them, don't look to them. They're a bad example. Think of yourself and think of your family and your community and what's best for you and them. And that's, do the things that will get you out of this situation.
Yeah, but all right, Jeffrey, and I like that. But I was looking at the community at whole, right? The community at large. All these folks out here who march when they saw folks shut down in the streets, George Floyd, and all these bad things that happened. And then, after that, after marching and all this ruckus that they caused, it still happened again and again. So it doesn't just happen in the prisons, it happens in the police. Prosecutors and judges violate folks daily, do the wrong thing. And these folks are aware of that when they go to these courts and these trials. They say, but hey, you use fake evidence. You made this stuff up and had someone come and lie and testify against me just for you to get this conviction. Whether I was guilty or not, you did that. And so you are doing wrong, but yet you don't want me to do it. So I'm talking about the overall message, right? It's to the entire community. How do we convince people to act right if we can't get those who are supposed to be acting right to act right?
I'm sorry.
I don't have a good answer to that, but just like,
I'll say, Deshaun, you have something to add or say?
Yeah, I just wanted to add what David was saying. That's a very hard question to answer. That's a conflict of interest, right? I've been through that up north, police not feeding me. But what Jeffrey said, that's what I had in my mind the whole time. I was like, they're not gonna defeat me. They're trying to take my soul. So see, this is what I think about us being out here and knowing that and being an advocate for that type of people in there, right? Because we know the energy, we know they doing bad. I was up to 7 years. They do bad all day. Commissary, they don't let you go to commissary because you might have said something, and you know, Peter paid for Paul, but that doesn't help people coming back and rehabilitating. Now you're keeping people more in fear, more like, you know what? When I catch you out there in the real world, I'm gonna do something to you.
Right.
And, you know, so I see that's how I feel like that's our duty. That's how, because we've been through that to see that, and now we have to create something around for that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And that, and keep fighting. You know, I mean, that's the kind of thing that, like, you know, if you get some, I mean, that's where lawyers can help. You know, just, you know, fight with lawsuits. You know, in general, like, because that has actually worked. I mean, that has actually, you know, like, that has caused, you know, lawsuits have caused police departments to, you know, have to shake everything up and fire people. Lawsuits of, you know, it was lawsuits that like shut down chain gangs, you know, in Arkansas and Mississippi, you know, so that's the only, I mean, I get, it's just keep, you know, you don't get to win. Like, you know, you don't get to beat me, you know, and you don't get to beat my people, my community, you know, and, you know, and we're going to stop the harm because it's good for us, you know, not you. It's not for you.
Yeah, but you cause so much harm yourself with this prison system. It's crazy.
I know, but what I don't have an answer. Like,
I appreciate that.
Because but if you know,
I truly appreciate you, Jeffrey. I needed, you know, I needed some guidance on that. You can't give it to me. That's okay. We're gonna keep asking this question.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep asking this question because somebody's gonna have to answer that for me.
Yeah.
Hey, David.
And I don't know that answer as a criminal. It's the answer I give you as a person, you know.
So,
I truly appreciate it.
David, I just wanted to, your question is the question that we need to be asking if we're going to systemically pull this up from the root. And the reason why our government, our country won't answer this question is because they don't want to. So the United States need to actually look at how the 13th Amendment is allowing them to keep slavery legal under mass incarceration. That's number one. The United States also needs to address that policing in this country was born out of slave catchers, and they're still operating the same way. You cannot ignore those roots of our history here. And so you're absolutely right. How do we structurally get communities and get people to not make these decisions when structurally they need us to make those decisions because we are money makers and they're not ready to give up mass incarceration as a way to make money in this country. And that is what I say when I'm presenting data, and then when I'm talking to, I don't care if it's a city council, state assembly, or federal or a congressman, and you have to hold that truth. And so I think we need to teach the personal responsibility is not enough to fix structural responsibility.
Oh, no.
At all. Right. And that's what David is. David keeps saying, but the structure, right? And I'm right with you.
Yeah.
But what we can do is that we can inform and educate and be like, listen, you know that they want you to go back. Our rates, our recidivism rates are higher than any other quote unquote first world country by design. They need us to go back to prison. So these are the conversations that we could be having with our community while we're doing the work to try to, you know, pull this up from the root. But that's what it is. We're constantly trying to fight structural responsibility with personal responsibility, and it's not going to work. Because our Constitution says slavery is legal under the 13th Amendment through mass incarceration. So if we don't take a look, and there is a campaign called Fix the 13th. It's a really good campaign to fix the 13th. My organization is joining the coalition because we want to make sure that the policy and the language is correct, but we got to start from the root. That's part of it. And we won't get there if we're not paying attention to those root causes and historically what this country is actually built on. And so there's no one answer, like if you do A, it'll stop, right? Because these are structural problems. But a lot of people in our community don't understand the structural historical problems. They're not aware of them. They don't know. Yeah, slavery is legal under the 13th Amendment. Yeah, this country doesn't want to actually fight crime because it's their moneymaker, right? And so even educating our people on that, knowing the game, right? You got to know your opponent if you're going to beat them. If you don't know your opponent and you don't know the tactics that they're using, then it's going to be really hard to beat them. But I'm with you, David, because we got to figure out structurally how to fix this, because like you said, it's benefiting. They benefit from us going back and forth.
I really agree with I totally, agree with the individual responsibility personal responsibility can't solve structural problems. Like, and you're working against, the US is a very, very individualistic country, like we think of everything as individuals. We think of everything as, if somebody's poor, well, they're poor because they made bad choices, or if somebody's sick, well, you're sick because you didn't take care of yourself. We think of everything individually, but you can't, social institutions and social systems don't, individuals don't, don't stand a chance. And I don't know the answer, and I don't know the alternative. I don't know what would be an alternative, but I do this
Well, Jeffrey,
racism is bone deep in the criminal justice system. It and has been, like you said, since slavery, and but he's even also later in the North, in the juvenile justice system, in imprisonment on up through to, it's so ingrained, and it's not, I don't know that it's the purpose of the criminal justice system, but it inflects everything it does. So for example, rural white cops in Pennsylvania and rural white, people involved in meth, the criminal justice system doesn't work great there either. But it's got everything with race, in the criminal justice system just has a special level, and there's just an extra, from arrest all the way through to parole and probation, that, and it's been, and I don't know how to cleanse it completely in a short time, but just keep bashing away at it, just keep bashing away, because it's like you said, it's there, it's been there for hundreds of years, and it's embedded in the training of cops and prison guards, and their subcultures, and it's embedded in rules that that don't look like they're about race, but they have impacts that are racial, but they can say, oh, this isn't racial. Well, but yeah, but its impact is, so that's a big topic right now, like actually in courts and sentencing, and say like prior criminal record, and sentencing somebody more harshly based on prior criminal record. Now, the average person might say, oh, well, that makes total sense. They did something bad before, and then they got in trouble again, and that's their personal, that's their bad judgment. That's their personal responsibility. But the problem is, if you do that, you put lots more Black men in prison just by doing that, just by counting prior record in sentencing. in sentencing guidelines, let's say, just by no other reason, just by doing that, you'll end up with, 30% more, over-representation of Black men in prison. Why? You know the answer. Because prior record starts with all the way back with police, and police, stopping a young Black man when they wouldn't stop a young white man, stop and frisk, I'm blanking on the word, pretextual stops, school discipline, this stuff builds prior records, and it looks like it's not, it looks like, oh, well, this is objective, but it's not objective, because the production of prior records is systemically racist. And there's a lot of people in, who are pushing states to don't, get rid of criminal record in sentencing, aside, and then, that's not taking down the whole system, but that's taken that one piece, just that one thing, and hitting it and saying, look, this is the impact, and you can see it clear as day, and you ought to do something about it. That's just an example I thought of.
Meek, did you have a question? I saw your hand was raised earlier.
I was just gonna add on to what David said. That's a really big topic, and I hear a lot of people looking for answers, and I always tell myself the answer is action. If we're gonna spend our whole lives looking for the answers, then we're never gonna get our issue completed. So I always think about it A equals A, because the system, they're gonna divide, and I say our population as the people of color, because they know that our power comes with numbers. So if we're all together, of course, they're gonna dominate the system. But because they know that, and a lot of people, and I would say our people as in our community, they're not informed of the resources. They're not informed of the other opportunities that they do have, but they're not available to us. So I feel if we inform our communities in a way that they can understand and interpret the law, we can dominate in numbers, and this issue that we have on our hands will be completed.
That's a very good point. And one thing I'll just add from my perspective, I definitely do think one of the biggest issues, that's why crime is always a sticky issue, and it always comes up because people, I feel Americans don't see eye to eye, but that's always this America, no one's going to see eye to eye, but most importantly, our community doesn't see eye to eye when it comes to criminal justice and how to solve it. Even in the 90s, a big crime bill, a lot of the crime bill was passed by progressive Democrats, and even, our own communities saying okay, we want to incarcerate these people who are doing drugs on the street because we don't want to see them. And a lot of times they work very hard to divide our community. And when you divide our community, it's very easy to divide our community when it comes to criminal justice, I feel because it's easy for, I feel in the Black community, we have a separation, which we all see, the haves and the have-nots of, oh, these people are bad and this is their fault and that's why they're like that. And no, we stay away from, oh, well, they deserve to be in jail. And we have that in our own community. And because of that, we fail to see the fault in the system and the underlying things that cause, their placement and the institutional aspects of it and the historical aspect that goes into the institutions. So, when we're not seeing the impact, we don't see it as the issue. We don't see it as a civil rights issue, which it is. And I feel back in the 60s, I feel a lot of criminal justice that we see is our modern day civil rights era, just especially now we're going to see a lot of effects with the post-COVID defunding of a lot of the things that we talked about earlier, Jeffrey. When we have that incarceration hit, that is something that's ravaging our communities of color. And that really is a civil rights issue. So it's if we don't come together, like they did in the 60s for the Brown v. Board era, when that was a big societal institutional change, then we won't really see change. It really is just us coming together and saying okay, this is something that's wrong. Either a lot of times in the civil rights era they did, which you kind of spoke about, Jeffrey, without unintentionally, but when it comes courts and policy, let's target something small, okay, this issue when it comes to segregation. And then, when we get that press in that court case, that's moving that system. But, to get this movement to where it needs to be, to really have this sort of change, I feel like, and especially when it comes to politics here, we have to get our people on the same page. And I think that's really, the fundamental aspect. We know we're stronger together, we're stronger in numbers, and they don't want us to be in numbers, which is why they divide us. So that's definitely also an aspect. Yeah. Okay. Any questions or any final remarks, guys? Anyone? Okay, I think I want everyone to do like outros or one thing that they want to add for everyone in the conversation, or one thing takeaway, could be a takeaway or something you want to inform the group, or anything you have coming up. But just, before we wrap up, so I want to say this has been a really great conversation. Really appreciate, I love conversations like this in my work, because I like to get people's inspiration and their balls turning, and we're having these topics with people who are similar, in our passion, our area of expertise, but we're coming from it from different perspectives. That's adding to our perspective. So definitely, we're in this movement together and we're stronger together. And thank you for coming and adding your points so everyone could say their outros and everything.
I want to say thank you for this opportunity and the knowledge that I just gained today, and a lot of understanding. This is a blessing just to, I've been, very hard to talk to my people out there. I've been feeling like giving up sometimes, feeling like I don't have, but I just felt good creating this atmosphere and the energy. It lets me know that I'm on the right track, that I got great minds that's all in the universe that's ready to do this work that God got for us. So blessings and peace. Thank you. You said one. All right.
All right. Again, I'm David Simpson, co-founder of the Remedy Project. And we are out to push for some immediate change within the prison system. We are fed. We're starting off fed. Hopefully we receive enough funding and support that we can also duplicate what we are doing for the states. That is the goal. The students are about to launch their online activism and or advocating part within a couple months on an action page. That is the second part of what we do. One is do the remedies in the prison, and the second part is expose the suffering and the hurt that people are going through, and so that we can force the system to, I like to say, if we do a good job at the Remedy Project, or I should say if the students do a great job at the Remedy Project, one of the things they would end up doing is change the mindset of those who, of the prison staff, right? And also those who are incarcerated also, because these folks take a lot of pain and abuse, and unfortunately, sometimes many of them take it and don't speak up and or reach out for help because they're afraid of being retaliated against, and so on and so forth. And so we want to change that mindset also. If you need help, you should be able to ask for it and reach out and get it. And so we hope that all folks on here could join and support the students at the Remedy Project. So it's the Remedy Proj, PROJ.org, but the organization name is the Remedy Project. They had, the students did some rebranding. We started off as the Student Justice League. And so please, everyone, get involved. And whenever I can, just like I came out to support Monet tonight, whenever I can, I'll get involved, to help support others. Deshaun, please feel free to stop by, reach out to us and get involved. I think you'll be super excited to see what's going on over at the Remedy Project, I think. And Mr. Jeffrey, I think I gave you something to think about. And if you want to hash it over again, brainstorm, please feel free. Because things need to happen. in a timely manner. So I'm not going to talk about stuff for too long. As you can see, like I'm telling you, your students are going to be taking action, right? So we're doing stuff. And so I don't mind having a conversation here and there, but I'm about action. I want to see something happen after we talk. Okay, so folks, please, thank you, Monette, for inviting me, and everyone on the panel. I truly appreciate you guys, and it's wonderful seeing everyone taking part in such a conversation and trying to make some real change within the system. Thank you.
Should I go? Okay.
Well, so we have Karis go, then Meek, and then Professor Ulmer. You could close us out.
Okay.
Monet, thank you so much, first of all, for inviting us. I'm so glad I saw the email. So thank you so much, Raven, for putting this conversation together. I just want to leave people with, check out the Breathe Act. It's a federal campaign addressing mass incarceration, housing, all the things that are impacting the Black community. And check out Fix the 13th, which is which is a campaign to fix the 13th Amendment. And then I'll just drop my website with my consulting firm and a lot of education that I have. I actually am releasing personal responsibility versus structural responsibility. And we just also released my racial justice curriculum with the YWCA. They've changed their mission to eliminating racism, empowering women. And so the racial justice curriculum that I wrote is being released in 3 weeks. And it takes a deep dive in how race is embedded in everything, from how we see education, housing, and all the things that are climate, how all the things are impacted. And I just look forward. Monet, please keep NNLB on the listserv so I can continue to be connected with folks, and actions are coming up, and I will definitely invite you, and you can let your whole network know, because action, we talk, we research, we study, and then, we put boots to the ground. So thank you again for this, Monet.
Yes, definitely let us know. Meek, you want to do your outro?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Jameek. I'm a part of S.J.I with Monet. I just want to bring my appreciation to her for bringing this together, because I know how hard everyone's scheduled, but this call was very helpful. I was definitely inspired by everyone who has spoken. I want to give a special shout out to Deshaun and David for just making an example of Black men who are incarcerated that can come out and do better and beat the odds. And I hate the phrase beat the odds, because that should never exist, but it does, and they are beating it. So I'm very grateful. Professor Ulmer, you were awesome. I love your expertise, and I hope to see you soon.
Also Professor Meek is actually a Penn State grad as well, in case you happen to see him at homecoming.
Yes.
Professor Ulmer, you could close this out. Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you. I feel really honored and, humbled by all the stuff that you're doing to make things better. I just study things. I don't, but you all make them better, and you all work and, keep bashing away at it. And I just want to, I want to give you all the encouragement and help I can. And again, I'm happy to keep the conversation going.
Well, we definitely appreciate your attendance and your time. I just want to say I appreciate everyone on this call. I know it was a little close to the date, So I definitely appreciate everyone for making it. I definitely, you know, one thing about us, you know, my org, if you jumped on late, societal justice intervention, we focus on criminal justice reform, but like we talked about, and like, you know, I studied, you know, we focus on more of the preventive aspects. So issues in our community that cause crime and incarceration. We focus a lot on youth, specifically ages 15 to 24, because that's when it's, you know, a higher likelihood, or even if you're, you know, incarcerated at 30 years old, it's still occurred in that age demographic. We also do a lot of advocacy. We also do a lot, and the other part we do is organization outreach. So we definitely, you know, want to continue these conversations with our partners. We like to have conversation, whether that's like our expert consultants when it comes to, you know, facing things on stats and studies, as well as just, you know, having other people's idea and having continuous networks like this where we're engaging in dialogue and really piggybacking off of each other's ideas, especially when we're based in New York and where we're approaching a new legislative session. So definitely, you know, reach out to us for anything that you guys are doing. We'll reach out to you for future events that we're having, whether it's Zoom, in person, or any other meetings we want to set in tandem. And I just want to say thank you everyone for joining us. All right, is there any
Thank you for
last,
putting this together?
yeah. Is there any last questions before we close out? Okay, well, definitely thank you again, everyone. Have a good night. I know we ran overtime, so that's always good when the conversation is flowing. But definitely reach out if you have any other questions, or if you want me to give you anyone's contact that was on the call or anything of that nature. You guys have my phone number and email, so definitely feel free to just reach out. And until then, we'll see you guys at the next event or call. All right, have a good night, everyone. Have a good weekend.